If you've been following the story of Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito's wife, her spat with a neighbor following the 2020 election, you've likely heard this a few times. That's the bleep universally recognized as a replacement for unsavory language, and it was used in the case to replace a derogatory epithet directed at Mrs. Alito. But who decides which words we bleep and why? Rafael Bernal has an in-depth look at the rules of censorship.
And 52 years ago, comedian George Carlin broke the internet with that list of 7 words you can't say on TV. Of course, there was no internet in 1972, and Carlin didn't say those words on TV. But in 1973, the Pacifica Foundation's New York-based WBAI station broadcast a version of Carlin's routine. A single complaint was filed with the FCC by John Douglas, a board member of a group called Morality in Media. Douglas just happened to tune in to WBAI while driving his 15-year-old son on Tuesday, October 30, 1973. Now, Douglas's outrage at the broadcast kicked off a legal process that ended up in the Supreme Court and helped establish the FCC's definition of obscenity, indecency, and profanity. So, for something to be obscene, it must appeal to the average person's prurient interest, depict or describe sexual conduct in a patently offensive way, and lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. For a broadcast to be indecent, it can't meet that standard, but it has to portray sexual or excretory organs in a way that is patently offensive. And profanity is just grossly offensive language considered a public nuisance. Now, obscenity is based from any broadcast regulated by the FCC. Indecency and profanity, they're fine between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. on airwaves, but that schedule doesn't apply to subscription services like cable TV and satellite radio. The FCC can revoke broadcasting licenses, impose fines, or issue admonishments and warnings to stations that violate those rules. Now, that hasn't prevented producers from pushing the envelope. In the 1990s, the cop show NYPD Blue was famous for its use of nudity and coarse language. NYPD Blue producer Stephen Bochco wrote in his memoir that he'd negotiated permission for his characters to use the word when the network tried to censor a character from making a particular hand gesture at Sipowicz, one of the main characters, Bochco threatened to have Sipowicz use that word 37 times. They folded and the guy flipped Sipowicz the bird, wrote Bochco. It could get a little silly. Luckily, with social media and online channels self-regulating, things are much more reasonable these days. Okay, fine. Let's accept that the internet can be a little chaotic. Remember that 7-second timer from the top of this video? That's there because YouTube, which recently loosened its swearing policy, limits monetization of videos that use some of Carlin's words in the first 7 seconds. And creators, whether they're big shot TV producers or dance fad TikTokers, they want to get paid. That's made for some strange adjustments to content on some social media platforms. TikTok, for instance, has some of the strictest regulations on violent and hateful content. But almost anyone can flag a post, and moderators have been known to have a heavy hand in pulling down content. And that's led creators to use words like unalive instead of dead or kill, or panini instead of pandemic to avoid triggering misinformation censors. Now, whether it's network TV or the deepest recesses of social media, it's a game of cat and mouse. The FCC's, Douglas Johnson's, content moderators, and community guidelines, they're busy defining what's appropriate and what isn't. But there are always a few Carlins, Bochcos, dance fad content creators out looking to flip the bird or just plain unalive censorship.
That's it for What's America Thinking. I'm Julia Manchester. Come back next week and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel.